There is no English monarch more iconic than Henry VIII. When most people think of an English king, it is Henry who comes to mind. He is found on playing cards, in paintings holding a turkey leg, and in television ads. Even today, almost 500 years after his death, he is a subject of popular movies and TV series. Although he was a cruel tyrant responsible for spilling a sea of blood, he had a greater impact on the formation of modern England than almost anyone else. However, Henry was not originally destined for the throne. His father, Henry VII, became king in 1485 when he defeated Richard III at the Battle of Bosworth Field. Henry had a brother, Arthur, who was 5 years his senior and next in line to the throne. But Arthur died in 1502 at the age of 15, leaving his younger brother next in line for succession. Henry VII died in 1509, and the 17-year-old Henry VIII became king. Soon after, Henry announced that he would marry his brother's widow, Catherine of Aragon, a decision that would prove fateful in years to come. There were three distinct periods in the history of Henry VIII's coinage. During the first period, which lasted from 1509 to 1526, Henry's coinage is of relatively high-quality silver, and still bears the portrait of his father, Henry VII, who had made the first change to the way the king was depicted on English coinage in hundreds of years. At the time of Henry's reign, the three great European powers were France, England, and the Habsburg Empire, which consisted of Spain and Germany. In 1520, Henry and the French king Francis met at the Field of Gold near Calais, France, in an attempt to improve relations between the two kingdoms. The rival kings spent 2 weeks entertaining each other and taking part in various sports and competitions. Though often bitter enemies, the two kings were of similar age and would hold a sort of mutual admiration for one another for the remainder of their lives. Henry was eager for a male heir to his throne, but after several failed pregnancies, Catherine only succeeded in providing Henry with a daughter, Princess Mary. Henry finally resolved that he would divorce and marry his mistress, Anne Boleyn. However, Pope Clement VII refused to allow for a divorce or annulment of the marriage, outraging Henry. After months of failed negotiations, Henry went ahead with his marriage, prompting the Pope to excommunicate him. Henry declared that the Pope had no authority in England and established the Church of England with the king as its supreme authority. Henry's new wife Anne bore him a daughter, Elizabeth, rather than a son. Before long, Henry grew impatient again and resolved to be rid of Anne as well, but he could not divorce again, so he convinced himself that Anne was having an affair. However, there is little evidence to support this. Henry had Anne beheaded on 19 May 1536. He then married Jane Seymour, who finally succeeded in giving birth to a son named Edward. But Jane died as a result of complications from the birth, which was not uncommon in that era. Henry would go on to marry 3 more times and to behead another of his wives. As Henry aged, he became more cruel and unpredictable. It is reported that his mood would change quickly and without warning. He would turn on his advisors for the slightest perceived failure, and often his leading ministers would move from his trusted inner circle to the executioner's block with frightening speed. Numerous theories have been offered to explain Henry's mood swings. These theories range from lead poisoning to venereal disease to head trauma suffered in a jousting accident in 1536 that left him unconscious for 2 hours. Regardless of the cause, it seems that Henry suffered from anxiety, depression, and paranoia. Due to his instability, England lost many talented and loyal subjects. During the second period of Henry VIII's coinage, a youthful, albeit somewhat plump portrait of the king himself is used. This portrait is very much in keeping with the Renaissance-style portraiture used in France and Italy at the time. Throughout this period, which lasted from 1526 until 1544, the quality of silver alloy used in the coinage was maintained at a high level. In spite of his deep flaws, Henry was a true Renaissance prince. He courted talented musicians and artists, and sought out men of science and learning for his court. He also embarked on a building program in which many fine structures were either built or improved. the most notable being Hampton Court Palace. Henry's most lasting contribution was the establishment of the Church of England, but sadly, during the process of England's conversion, many of the old churches and monasteries were damaged or destroyed, and countless artistic and historic treasures were lost forever. The third period of Henry VIII's coinage is scarcer than that of the first two, as it only lasted from 1544 until 1547. This period saw the classic portrait of Henry, larger than life, used on the coinage. During this period, the debasement of the coinage was in full swing. The percentage of copper in the coinage increased, and the silver declined. As these coins would wear, the copper would become visible. The first place this wear was apparent was on the king's nose. This earned Henry the unflattering nickname Old Copper Nose. After his fall in 1536, Henry's health began to decline. In this fall, he had suffered a wound to his leg that had never healed. His doctors noticed that when the wound was allowed to close over, Henry would suffer fevers and sickness, so the wound would not be allowed to heal over, and it was chronically infected, and was said to emit a horrible odor that was unpleasant to everyone in the king's vicinity. Henry also suffered from obesity. His waist measured 54 inches, and he grew to over 400 pounds. He was fed an extremely rich diet, heavy in fat and red meat. This caused him to suffer from gout. He was also plagued by outbreaks of boils that would erupt and cause pain. All of this led to Henry's death in 1547 at the age of 55. He was buried next to his favorite wife, Jane Seymour, in a vault in Windsor Castle. Interestingly, 102 years later, the vault would be opened to add the body of King Charles I, who had been executed in 1649. When this vault was opened again in the 1800s, it was found that Henry's casket was damaged. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and hit the like button. That way you'll know when more videos are released.